Okay, let's dive into something pretty fundamental today.
Mm.
We're unpacking a source that looks at how much of us is, well, down to our genes versus environment, effort, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a big topic, and people have strong feelings. This source, it pulls from books like It Cannot Be Said Because Reality is Too Cruel. Interesting title.
Yeah. And the truth about heredity, 90% of Japanese don't know. It uses data, studies, especially twin studies.
And it takes a pretty provocative stance.
Definitely. It argues life is largely shaped, maybe even determined by genetics. Destiny, kind of?
Right, yeah, as the source puts it. And effort, environment, important, sure, but secondary, limited.
The focus is on things like height, weight, IQ, personality, talent stuff you're born with, more than skills you learn.
Exactly. And they use this idea of the heredity rate.
Explain that a bit.
It's basically a percentage. How much is genes versus environment for a specific trait? And the source has some really interesting stories to back this up.
Yeah, like the fingerprint one, that really stood out. You'd think, okay, 98% hereditary. Identical twins must have identical prints.
You would think. But no, that tiny bit of environment, especially, in the womb, it makes a difference. Even identical twins have slightly different prints.
Which led to this crazy case in Malaysia, 2003.
Oh, yeah, tell that one.
So police arrest a guy, drugs in his truck. They go to his house, find his identical twin brother.
Uh-oh.
And because they hadn't taken fingerprints right at the roadside arrest...
They couldn't prove which twin was driving. The prints were too similar, but crucially not identical.
So
both acquitted. Couldn't pin it on either one definitively.
Wow. The source uses it to show, one, why initial fingerprinting matters, but also it's such a stark example of environment tweaking even highly genetic traits.
Absolutely. And they mention other things too, like iris patterns, veins, also unique between identical twins.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Now, IQ, always controversial.
Always. The source cites twin studies suggesting 54 to 80% heredity.
Which is high, but here's the bit I found really counterintuitive.
The age thing.
Yeah. It claims genetic influence on IQ actually gets stronger as you get older. Environment matters less, especially after puberty, say age 10 or so.
It is surprising, isn't it? The idea is early on, a kid's environment, home life, parental input makes a big difference in school performance.
Makes sense.
But later, the underlying genetic potential, the sort of IQ genes, they start to dominate more.
So you could have kids doing equally well in primary school, but then later
they diverge. One might surge ahead, another plateau, even if they're both working hard. It's the genetic potential kicking in more strongly.
The source ties this to why we might look more like our biological parents as adults. And it implies, maybe controversially, that all that intense studying after puberty might not overcome a genetic ceiling as much as we hope.
And it flips the idea of fairness. If genes are that powerful, a fair system treating everyone the same might just amplify those innate differences.
So true fairness might mean
what?
Tailoring things.
Tailoring education to individual, maybe inborn talents, rather than the same track for everyone. That's the implication. And yeah, twin studies are crucial for separating these gene-environment effects.
Okay, what else does the source say is highly heritable?
Well, personality comes in around 40–60%, shaped a lot in adolescence. Height, 66%. Weight, this one's high, 88%.
88% for weight?
Yeah. The source is quite firm. Argues it's largely genetic predisposition, not just, laziness or diet alone.
Wow.
And then things like addiction, severe mental illnesses, schizophrenia, 82%, bipolar, 83%, ADHD, 80%. All very high. Oh, and musical talent, apparently the highest at 92%.
92%? That's almost entirely genetic.
According to this source, yeah.
Huh?
And look, it also includes some really controversial data points. Like citing the bell curve findings about average IQ differences between racial groups. It presents this as data from that source.
Wait, and we need to be clear here. We're just reporting what the source material says. This is a highly debated, politically sensitive area, and we're not endorsing these specific findings.
Exactly. Just conveying the content. The source does try to balance it, suggesting different groups might have different innate strengths, maybe physical versus cognitive, for example.
Right. So it all comes back to this core conclusion from the source.
Which is pretty stark. Effort fundamentally cannot overcome genetics.
They use that analogy, right? Success equals genes times effort.
Yeah. Genes might be a factor of 0, 1, or 3, say.
Yeah.
Effort is 1 to 5. If your gene factor is 0 for something,
Doesn't matter how much effort you put in, 0 times anything is 0.
precisely, effort sculpts or maximizes the potential your genes give you, but it can't create potential that isn't there, genetically speaking. That's the argument.
So, wrapping this up, this source paints a picture where genes are incredibly powerful, maybe even increasingly so, in areas like IQ as we age.
Environment matters, effort matters, absolutely, but maybe they work within the boundaries set by our genes.
It definitely leaves you thinking. If you accept this perspective, even partly that life is heavily gene-determined, effort secondary, how does that change how you think about personal responsibility? Or fairness? Social equity?
Well, even just how you define success for yourself.
Oh, yes.
It's a lot to chew on.
Definitely gives you pause.